Okay, good afternoon and welcome everybody to another Reading Online Sports Economics Seminar, our 145th, I counted up. We're very pleased this afternoon, this morning, this evening, depending where you are, to have Federico Fioravanti, who's going to be presenting for us visitors out, the absence of away team supporters as a source of home advantage in football. Federico's happy to take questions as you go along, so please do raise your hand, ask questions if you want to whilst he is speaking, and there's plenty of time, A, for his talk and B, for questions and discussions as we go along and at the end. Without any further delay, Federico, please do take away your talk.
Well, thanks, James, for the invitation to the seminar. I'm really happy to be here presenting this work in progress. It's a joint work with Fernando Del Bianco and Fernando Tomé from Bahia Blanca, Argentina. And I guess that they are here in the audience. So if there is no problem for any of you, they will jump in sometimes if they want to. I had them as my bodyguards, just in case. So this is a working paper, as I mentioned. So you will see some things that they are not in the paper that is available on internet. I also included some tables and some results that were found last night. So you will be seeing something that's got right out of the oven. Okay, so what the name is Visitors Out. We are dealing with the home advantage effect on football. Some motivation first. Well, home advantage, that is this effect that the home teams tend to have a benefit by playing in their own fields, is something that has been studied for quite a long time and has been confirmed since what can be considered the first work on it by Schwartz and Barsky. Different approaches have been considered for this effect, possible causes of these effects, such as physiological, psychological, defects that have some economical issues. And there are many authors that explore how this home advantage is affected by referee biases. I have to mention that I was a rugby referee a couple of years ago, so in some sense I can confirm this. Confirm, but there is some pressure from the local crowds that may affect the referee performance, but I'm not going to discuss that today. And this effect has also been studied in many sports. There is a lot of literature discussing and studying this effect on football. There are also in other popular sports such as rugby and basketball, and athletics that might not be so popular, at least outside Argentina. And it has also been considered in major events such as Olympic Games and the football FIFA's World Cup. And on all these studies, the effect is that, yes, indeed, the teams have an advantage when they play at home. And then we have COVID-19. So the COVID-19 give like a boost to this, to the research of the home advantage, because the COVID-19 gave us a natural experiment where we can test what happened when there is no people, no public at all on a sport event. So there are many studies for the COVID-19 period that confirm that the home advantage indeed decreased when there were no public at all on the sport events. And it has been confirmed in football, rugby union, basketball, ice hockey, American football, and more sports. And for example, there is also this paper. I don't want to mention the surname because I probably will do it wrong. That in rugby league there was no they couldn't find any effect of the absence of the crowds into the home advantage. For the home advantage, well, there are many reasons discussed in the literature. The pressure that the home crowd affects over the teams, like with their chants encouraging the local team, or with their chants like making more nervous the away team, the home field knowledge of the local team. Sometimes there are many tournaments where teams have to travel a lot to play. For example, we can think in Europe, the international clubs competition where they had to travel from one country to another. Argentina, for example, is a really long country where if some team of the north has to play with some team of the south, they might have a 2 days travel. Also, for example, time zones. In Australia, they have different time zones, and if some team from the west is playing with a team of the east, time zones change, and that can be something that affect the home advantage. And as I mentioned before, also the referee bias that that can affect the outcome of a game, changing this home advantage of each of the teams. And it's worth to mention that it's not only because of the referee bias can exist not only because of the presence of the crowds. It can also exist because when a referee gets into a game, he meets people and not necessarily fans. He meets maybe the president of the club and that, and then there can be some pressure with that. And then we get into the case of the Argentinian football. Unfortunately, on June of 2013, before a game between Estudiantes de La Plata and Lanús, one of Lanús fans was killed by the police. I don't want to go too much into the details of that. Then after that game, the Argentinian Football Association decided to implement a policy of no visitors allowed into the stadiums. That policy was supposed to last for a couple of weeks until the beginning of the next tournament, but I believe 2 or 3 weeks after this incident, there was another incident between two factions of the Boca Juniors hooligans, but we call it in Argentina Barra Bravas, that ended up with 2 people from the same team, from fans from the same team that were killed. So the Argentinian Football Association decided to keep that measure. There were many situations or many isolated intents to get back to normality, but they weren't very successful. And to give you just a number, since this policy has been implemented, where only home fans are allowed into the stadiums, there were 71 victims. So we have 10 years of games being played without visitor fans, and still we had 71 victims. That is more than the 61 victims that were on the 10 previous years. So if we want, I don't know how to do a sociological analysis of this, but the problem is much deeper than just not allowing the visitor fans to go into the football stadiums. And also it seems that this measure will not change very soon, as, for example, the biggest teams from Argentina do not have too much intentions to go back to normality, because they have big stadiums with a large number of fans, and they can fill their stadiums with their own fans, so they don't care if they have visitors or not. But this is a measure that it really complicates the economical situations of the small clubs, as whenever they play versus a big team, or one team that can be considered as a big team, they have all the tickets revenue from the visitors, fans that go into those games. So yeah, it's very complicated. Probably we won't see normal games, at least for a while, here in Argentina. But now going to the scientific part of this, that's the one that it is interesting for us, I guess. This Argentinian situation creates a natural experiment where we can test, we can see if the visitor fans has an influence on the home advantage effect. And I want to mention here, like, we are going to consider two different notions of home advantage. One is considered as the score difference between the home and the away team. And the other one, the home advantage, can be measured as the winning rate of the home teams. And because during the last 10 years, we had this half and a year period where matches were played without public at all, we can also test the influence of the crowd attendance or absence on the home advantage. Okay, so in some sense, we have all the coherent possible situations. We have matches where we have free attendance, home and away fans, matches where just home fans are in the stadium, and matches where there are no fans. The other combination is matches where there are not home fans, but yes, away fans, but that doesn't seem possible, at least on a large scale. Good. What is the data that we have? We have more than 7,000 matches from the top Argentinian competition for about 20 years, 2003 to 2022. More than 3,300 games that were played without away fans since this no visitors policy was implemented. 103 ghost games, as Leiner and Richland call it, that were played without public at all. That leave us with more than 3,700 games without restrictions, with what we call free attendance. And we are going to consider the 44 teams that participated on the top Argentinian tournament. I will say top Argentinian competition or tournament because the name of the tournament changed many times during the last 20 years, mostly because of marketing issues. So we are considering the 44 teams that participated on the top Argentinian competition. Some brief statistics here. We have that the mean of the home goals during these 20 years is 1.33, and the mean of the away goals is 1.01, giving a home advantage measured as the difference of goals scored of 0.32 for the local team, for the home team. So home teams tend to score at least a third of a goal more on average. What are we going to test? So we're going to test if teams increase the home advantage after the prohibition of away fans. Remember that this is the period surrounding 2013. We, thanks to the COVID, for saying it in some nice way, we're going to test how these full lockdown policies, where no people was allowed at all, affected the home advantage. The hypothesis is that the home advantage decreased. We will consider different types of samples, depending on if we are surrounding like the no visitors policy implemented on 2013 or the full lockdown policies implemented on 2020. And we also are going to highlight the 5 teams with the most home advantage during the last 20 years. That is River, Boca, Talleres, Estudiantes de La Plata, and Vélez. Those are the 5 teams with the most home advantage on the last 20 years. A first glimpse of the data. So here we can see the mean home advantage for all the teams, for the top 5 teams that I just mentioned, and for the not top 5 teams during the last 20 years, from 2003 to 2022. And if we highlight in this shadow area, we highlight these years that are the years surrounding the no visitors policy. We can see at first sight that the home advantage for the top 5 teams increased. At least it's something that you can see at first sight. But the home advantage for all the teams or for the not top 5 teams didn't change too much, or it even decreased. And if we look at this shaded area, that is the one for previous to the COVID or lockdown policies and after the lockdown policies, we see something that is two things that are interesting, at least at first sight. The first one is that before COVID, home advantage for top 5 teams was high, was normal, decreased by a nice amount, but then jumped to the peak of the last 20 years for the top 5 teams. And the other thing that I think is more interesting is that the home advantage decreased on average for all the teams, and particularly for not top 5 teams, decreased so much that it turned into what we can call a home disadvantage. They start to score less goals than the visitor teams. If we can see some numbers here. So for 2013, that it was the no visitor policy was implemented. Yes, Jorge, you have a question? Yeah.
Yes. How are you doing? I have one question before you go on, because normally in Argentina, when you talk about the top 5 teams, you consider Boca, River, San Lorenzo, Independiente, and Racing, right? But you're considering, Estudiantes, which, I mean, they are a big team, but not that much, and Talleres also, if I saw correctly. So, yeah, I know you are taking them because they are empirically the teams that have the most home advantage, but I don't know if that is messing a bit what you're trying to show, because I guess it would be interesting to see is how the real top 5 teams how they perform versus the rest, because I don't know, especially Talleres, I don't know what's going on. Why are they so special? But more importantly, so what's going on with Racing? Why don't they have a home advantage as significant as Talleres? It's a big difference, or Independiente.
Like the easy question is like, if we are dealing with home advantage, we want to have an objective measure of which teams are the best in some sense. The first measure that we found is, okay, let's talk about the home advantage. One more complex answer, it might be that the teams that you mentioned, they are considered also like the 5 big teams, but because of their history, like since the Argentinian tournament started at all 1900 or something like that. That doesn't mean that on the last 20 years they were the best teams. So I understand Racing, Independiente, and San Lorenzo are considered one of the 5 big teams of Argentina, but mostly because of history. If we look into the most successful team on the last 20 years, probably some of those teams that you mentioned will not appear on that list. And also, specifically, the case about Talleres is it is a very important team from Córdoba province. There is a province in the middle of the country where they are very passionate about their team. And I guess that influence a lot the home advantage effect, because when teams have to go and play in Córdoba against Talleres, I think in some sense they suffer more the presence of the local fans. So it is known, or some people say that it's not easy to go and play on those places. So that is also maybe an explanation of why Talleres appears as one of the teams with more home advantage. But also that doesn't mean that they do it well when they are playing as visitors. So we wanted so the easy question, and the one that I truly believe, is that we wanted an objective measure of for home advantage, for dealing with home advantage. The objective measure, okay, let's see what are the teams, which are the teams that on the last 20 years have the most home advantage, and see if they have a consistent difference when we compare it with the rest. I don't know if that answer, or if you have any. So it is true that the 5 bigs of Argentina are not the 5 teams that I mentioned historically, but that doesn't mean that on the last 20 years they are still the best teams.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just to mention that San Lorenzo won the Copa Libertadores in 2014, no? After Estudiantes won it before. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess your answer is okay. I think it's just, even when you say about Talleres, it's difficult. I think you're endogenizing the issue, and maybe you don't want to do that. That's
common. Now I remember we discussed this. So one of the other author wants to jump in. So okay, I remember that we discussed this about, okay, are we going to consider the 5 big traditionally bigger teams? But we're like, okay, which teams should we add? Because you can also consider News from Rosario, or Rosario Central from Rosario, that they have won some international competitions. From Córdoba, you can have Talleres or Belgrano. From Lanús won some championships on the last 20 years. So we discussed about, okay, do we deal with the traditionally and historically bigger 5 teams, or we use some kind of measure for picking the 5 best in something on the last 20 years. But of course, yeah, it is true what you mentioned about endogenizing the sample. Yeah, that might be true. But we want just an objective measure that could be useful to measure precisely home advantage. So we use the home advantage. Okay, so we have these numbers here that can show that the home advantage increased for just a little bit for all teams after the no visitors policy was implemented. Increased a bit more for the top 5 teams, but the increase was less for the not top 5 teams. And after, on the following season, the home advantage for the top 5 teams keep on increasing, while for the not top 5 team decrease. And also, these numbers are for the COVID period, where the home advantage decreased for all teams and then increased when the home fans were back at the stadiums. We can see this high jump, this big jump for the top 5 teams. And we can see how the home advantage turned into negative home advantage or home disadvantage for not top 5 teams during the absence of the crowds. Okay, so now we're going to do some regressions, and first we're going to deal with the model that considers home advantage as the difference of goals scored by the home team minus the goals scored by the away team. We have this model that considers if there was public, free, restricted, that is when only home fans are allowed. It is closed, or when we have these ghost games with no public at all, and some dummy variable and fixed events, like the calendar and when the game was played. The first thing that we can see here is that when we consider in the whole sample, we compare the games played with no public or closed versus free or restricted attendance. We have that the COVID restriction has a negative impact on the home advantage of roughly half of a goal for the home team. So teams score when we compare games with no public at all, compared with free or restricted games, score half goal more. But this effect, when we consider the pre-COVID sample, and we want to compare free access versus restricted access, we find that the effect is not so significant. It's something that we could have an intuition by the previous graph that I showed to you. Then these coefficients are considering different dummies, or even for when the game was played, and still we have highly significant results that the absence of both crowds, the absence of public, has a high effect on the home advantage, a great effect on the home advantage. When now we're going to do, this is the model where we consider home advantage as the winning rate of the team, where this dependent variable is 1 when the team wins and 0 otherwise. And we're going to focus on this period of time, that is before and after the no visitors policy was implemented, for the top 5 teams. We have that there is some effect that is not highly significant, but there is an effect when we compare restricted versus free access. So top 5 teams score half a goal less when top 5 teams score half a goal more when no visitors were allowed. But if we look into what happened for the whole teams, I told you this is a work in progress. This table in the paper, this result will be for the period 2012 to 2014, but the calculation have been done, so the result is the same. It's similar. We have that there is no effect for all the teams when we compare restricted versus free attendance. There is no significant effect of the absence of visitor fans for the whole teams. And there is also, when we consider the whole sample before the COVID policies, we can also see that there is no effect, no significant effect for all the teams. So this policy of no visitors didn't have a major effect on the home advantage on average for all the teams. Good. Now we dig a little with the top 5 teams on the period surrounding the no visitors policy, where we see here that this is the mean of the home advantage when the policy was already implemented, and this is the mean for the top 5 teams when the policy was not implemented. And we have a not highly significant result that there is a difference of means between the restricted and the free period of the competition. But there is an effect. Yeah? There is a difference. So top 5 teams tend to score more or increase their home advantage during this period after the implementation of the no visitor policy. That's something that we could get some intuition while looking at the graph. And what is interesting, we think about the whole graph, is that it looks like teams got used, because after this period, there is no measured differences. So we can see like we can think that teams got used of playing only with the home fans. And we think that is interesting, at this effect does not happen, or we do not find this effect if we consider top 2 teams or top 10 teams. Top 2 teams, again, considering the top 2 teams with most home advantage, are Boca and River. Those are historically the most successful teams. They are the most successful team of the last 20 years. So one conclusion that one can think about is that they are so powerful that just they don't care about the people, or having the visitors or not is the same for them. And it's something that it's in some senses intuitive to think about. Remember what I mentioned to you before, that they have really large stadiums and a large number of fans. So on the free period, they would usually fill their own stadiums with, I don't know, they like just saying random numbers, but with 80% of the capacity with their own fans, and just a little number of fans from the opposing team. So this having or not the opposing team's fans does not make a huge change for them. And this same effect does not happen for the top 10 teams. The reasons behind that are more obscure to us, but intuitively we think that from the 6th position to the 10th position, the home advantage for those teams is not so different than for the rest of the team, but it's a bit more obscure. Now we can jump into the top 5 teams, but on the period surrounding the COVID policies lockdown implementation. We have that when the top 5 teams play with only home fans has a mean home advantage of 0.74, and when they played with no crowd at all, with no fans at all, that decreased to 0.22. And it is, so we see that there is an effect, yeah, that, but it's not highly significant. That is what the intuition that the graph gave us before. Yeah, we can see this high jump from the moment where no crowds were at all on the stadiums to the moment where home fans are allowed. That we started to think about this, and one possible explanation for this is that having their fans back represents a huge thing for the top 5 teams, in a sense that they went from playing with 0 people, with empty stadiums, to play into stadiums where they have full attendance or almost full attendance with just their own fans. And this can generate a different effect for small teams than to big teams. Why? Because it's easy to see. Bigger teams has more fans, and smaller teams have less fans. So going to play from 0 to your whole number of fans, has a huge effect on your emotion and everything that can be helpful for you to win the game when you are at home. But that is not the same effect that the small teams can get from their reduced crowd or their smaller number of fans. But still, this effect, the thing that the home advantage is still positive for them when there are no public at all, needs more research. This is more interesting, I believe, is that for the not top 5 teams that went from an average or a mean home advantage of 0.19 to a negative home advantage of 0.25, and in this case it is highly significant. So for the smaller teams or the not top 5 teams playing without public at all, and remember, during this period only home fans were allowed, playing without their home fans had a huge effect on their home advantage, and the effect was so high that they start having a home disadvantage. That was the thing that we could see on the graph before. So in this case, a possible conclusion of this is that anything that is not related to the home fans does not have a really important effect on the home advantage. Because that's the only thing that, I mean, these are complex systems, so, but if we want to make it very simple, the only thing that changed from this period to this one for this not top 5 team was the presence of their own fans. And then the home advantage went to negative value. So one possible conclusion is that the rest of the reasons that usually are considered for dealing with home advantage that are not related with the home crowd are not so important into determining the home advantage of at least not top 5 teams. Okay, some summary of the results that we have up to now. Hopefully, we will have this paper done not so far away in time. But up to now, we have these results that home advantage decreased during the COVID. That's something that has been confirmed in the literature before, but it was way worse for the smaller teams. A bounce effect for top 5 teams after COVID restrictions. That's something that we saw on the initial graph, and what we saw with the difference of mean test. This is something, again, that has been confirmed previously in the literature of COVID-19 and home advantage. And this is what we found, or what we have related to the no visitors allowed into the stadiums. But there is a small effect for top 5 teams when we compare free attendance with restricted attendance. This does not happen for the whole teams, and this effect disappears for top 2 or top 10 teams. So the possible conclusions, we need to understand that this is something. So we are working with the Argentinian football example. So we are not so sure if we can extend it to other countries, and we are not so sure if in other countries there are this situation of no visitors allowed. But possible conclusions are the top 5 teams are benefit by the presence of their fans, but they still have some gap. So what we saw during the COVID period is that with no fans, still they have a positive home advantage. And this can be interesting in a sense that they can, bigger teams can do some trade-off about fans going to the stadium or maybe staying at home, watching the games using internet or television. They can do some trade-off with that. Another possible conclusion is that the home crowd seems to be highly important for smaller teams, in a sense that when smaller teams did not have their home fans with them, the home advantage turned into a home disadvantage. Again, this information can be useful for a smaller team in a sense that, okay, try to do some trade-off between, okay, let's give some tickets for free, we will win less money, but we can win more games. This can be important for smaller teams. We see, especially with the graph bar, that teams got used of playing with only home fans. There was this effect that and this is small benefit that the top 5 teams got from the no visitors policy, but this effect was seen only on the first year after the policy was implemented. So after that, like the home advantage start moving like before. So that's something that we can conclude, or one possible conclusion is that teams got used of playing with only home fans, and they will got used to play with different policies implemented. Hopefully, we will not have the chance to see something similar to the COVID pandemic, and we will not have the chance to test an experiment of teams playing for a couple of years with no public at all. But we can think that teams will get used to that too. And that's all up to now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Federico. I am going to give you a Teams round of applause. Others might do the same. Thank you for a really interesting talk on an interesting case in Argentina. I've personally written a paper on Egypt, where in Egyptian football they banned all fans from around the same time period.
I found that paper this week, and I said, oh, he did the same as we did. And then I realized that no, that in Egypt they banned all the fans.
All fans, yeah.
Oof, but it was much more violent than in the Argentinian case.
Yeah, yeah. But it's quite interesting because Egypt, you might say, well, it's not a particularly big footballing nation, whereas Argentina, you know, worldwide renowned footballing nation. So it's somewhat surprising to learn, as I have done, that this situation has been brought in over the last 10 years now. We've got loads of time for Q&A, so if anybody does have any questions and comments they want to ask Federico or his co-authors, please do raise your hand. Stefan's got his hand up.
Hi, Federico. Yeah, very interesting, and these are always great papers to see because these are very good natural experiments, as you say. So I think I want to suggest there's a problem and a possible solution here. So particularly when it comes to COVID, I think one of the problems is, and this may have to do with the banning of away fans as well, I don't know, but one of the problems is that you're saying the logic of your argument is that it's the effect of the fans being there in the stadium, that somehow it's a psychological effect. There's waves transmitting from the fans to the players and it improves their performance, or maybe they're intimidating the referee, and all of those things are possible. But when it comes to COVID, there's another possibility that you might want to consider, which is that COVID was a financial disaster for pretty much everybody. And it was particularly a financial disaster for the small teams, not so much the big teams. So one thing that implies is when COVID hit, small teams are actually likely to be downgrading the quality of their squad. They're trying to cut their payroll at the same time, whereas the big teams may not be actually obliged to do so. So one thing that could be going on here is that small teams are actually fielding worse squads, and so that's one reason why they're losing more, whereas the big teams are able to field as strong or nearly as strong squads as they were before COVID. And I think part of this problem part of the problem that this suggests is that this, as you kind of were discussing, this definition of top 5 teams, top 2 teams, top 10 teams is slightly problematic in the sense that, you know, what's a top 5 team? Is a top 5 team a good team? What do you mean? Could it change over time? And there's a simple solution for this, which is really to try to control for the quality of the teams based on some objective measure. And see, James is nodding his head because James, I know exactly what James is going to say. James is going to say, put the ELO ratings of the 2 teams into your regression. James is the apostle of the ELO rating, right? Yeah. Isn't that right? Yeah. Well, of course, and James knows exactly what I'm going to say here, because I'm going to say, no, don't use the ELO rating. Use the transfer marked values of the 2 teams, because I am the believer in the transfer marked values. But either way, either of these approaches will work for you. I don't think it really, in the end, it doesn't matter. But what it will enable you to do is to control for the quality of the teams measured with some objective measure of quality, and then see whether you get these fan presence effects once you've taken that into account.
Well, interesting comment. Yeah, that's true. The COVID pandemic has terrible consequences, financial consequences, especially for smaller teams. So we should check, in some sense, if the squads change a lot. Because what I'm not sure if in some sense, in Argentina, Argentinian football is kind of in some kind of financial crisis always, doesn't matter COVID or not. So I'm not so sure if many teams had to downgrade their squads. So I'm not sure. It's
Right.
it's in some sense it's a kind of a feeling that they do not have to let many of their players out, in a sense like, okay, we are not able to pay you. So yeah, it is interesting to control by the team's quality, but my intuition is that the result will remain the same, as probably there were no major changes on the squads of the teams.
Well, I think that, I mean, maybe that's it, but I think the bigger point here is that you are modeling the results.
Yeah.
The goal difference, the win. We do know that the relative resources of the two teams are, in terms of the quality of the players' pitch, that is definitely a significant causal factor. And so you have a very big omitted variable in your modeling, and one that is very easy to put in. It's not going to take you an awful lot of work either to construct the ELO rating or to scrape the transfer mark values. Very easily done. So you can just solve this problem and it will go away. But the problem, I don't think you can really ignore this problem because you're modeling results.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. Great comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan. Other questions and comments? Get on.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. You were brave enough to present to this panel, which I have not been brave enough to do so. I appreciate that.
First time.
I guess my question is following up on a comment that Stefan made about the psychological aspect of it is, because we model results as an outcome, but things lead to the result. So I'm wondering, like, is it there's more possession by the home team? Is there the ball more in the attacking versus defense? Is it what is a strike is a strike, right?
Yeah.
Presumably, if I kick a ball when I'm at home with away fans or not, I may or may not kick better if there are no away fans. I think penalties might be impacted by that if you're kicking in front of the away supporters or not, possibly. But what is it that we're seeing? What is the actual change in the match other than scoring goals that is leading to the fact that they're scoring more goals? What is this home advantage? How does it manifest in terms of the match overall, other than the score itself, that enables a team to potentially score more goals than the other team, etc.? That's what I'm sort of following up, as I said, on Stefan comment. What the psychological aspect? Where do we see the change other than goals that leads to that better result at the end?
Yeah, that's true. It would be nice to find which of the aspects within the game change because of these different measures. But unfortunately, we don't have those. We don't have within game metrics. So it's so easy to find, at least on large scale, all these metrics that you mentioned, as possession, as number of kicks to the goal, and things like that, for sure. So my intuition is that yes, that all the within game metrics change, and of course they will change because the scoring, like the final outcome, that is a scoring change, but we do not have the data for the within game metrics that are useful for that kind of analysis. So and also we try to keep it as simple as we can, like try to isolate the effect of the home fans and the visitor fans. But yeah, you're right. Like this the presence of home fans, visitor fans, or something like that has an impact on how the players play, and that may have an impact on the metrics of the within game metrics of the game. But unfortunately, we don't have that data.
Great, thanks, Guidon. And there's 3 slots in February if you want to present a paper. You'll be very welcome to. Federico, and just actually we've got one more hand, so I'll let the other hand go first. That's Rob. Then I'll ask a question. Go on, Rob.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Just, I mean, a question about the fans themselves. You're just taking, are the fans there? Are they not there? But one dimension that might be worth exploring is the intensity of the fans. And, Stefan and I had a paper a few years ago on the effect of hooliganism on English football clubs, which were broadly negative. So teams with high incidences of football-related arrests got lower revenues. So I'm wondering if there's a way into this with your database. Are there particular teams in Argentina which are affected by hooliganism, which might potentially be off-putting for attendance? And I'm not sure what the consequences would be for home advantage, but it might be worth looking at that.
Thanks. Interesting question. The first thing that comes into my mind about the hooliganism, or what we call in Argentina barra bravas, is that, of course, I mean, barra bravas in Argentina work like an organization, like a mafia in some sense, and of course, bigger clubs with larger number of fans have larger numbers of barra bravas or hooligans. But if you look into the situations of violence inside the stadiums and outside the stadiums all around Argentina, you do not find as I told you, this is my intuition. You do not find like a pattern of, okay, there is one club, the hooligans from one club that are worse than the other. So in some sense, the hooligans of all the clubs are terrible, and they all work as these kind of organizations where they are in charge of the parking of the cars next to the stadium, and they are in charge of reselling tickets and things like that. That all of those things are illegal, but they are in charge of it anyways. So I don't see that there is like a special, okay, these barra bravas are the worst. But yeah, it might have an effect or the intensity of the people that attends to the stadiums. I wouldn't say maybe that the intensity depends on the hooligans or the barra bravas, because usually most of the people tend to be very intense when they go into a game, not just the hooligans. The hooligans here in Argentina are in charge of the business outside the field. But yes, that might be interesting, but at least at first sight, it was not, I think it's not easy to find the information of, for example, how many people attended into the games. It's not something when you, like the Argentinian Football Association, do not have a good database where you can find that kind of data.
You mentioned at the start of your talk, Federico, about the number, I might have got it wrong, but you mentioned the number of deaths that had taken place at football matches before and after. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Because I guess that means that you must know which stadium those, or around which stadium those deaths took place.
Yes. I mean, I don't know it, but yes, that's information. Yes.
And I guess that's some crude measure of, you imagine that the worst games for
Yeah.
violence would be the ones where that kind of event would have taken place.
Yeah, that's true. It would be nice to check if there is some pattern on that, but at first sight, when you check into the news, it's not like you're always watching or seeing in the news, okay, this team has this problem. It's like, this small team has one of their fans killed. It's why? And then you go into this big team has one of their fans killed, and this other small team is, as I told you, at first sight, as an intuition, is like there is no regular pattern. Like, okay, these are the most dangerous teams. But yeah, it is true that if we check at least the last 20 years, where more than 130 deaths happen, we might get. But sometimes there were. I mean, it's incredible. So and pissed me off like a lot. But sometimes the deaths were someone pushing one of their fan of their own team in a stadium, and it's it's madness. In some sense, it's madness, complete madness. But yeah, as I told you, at first sight, you don't find a regular pattern of a particular dangerous team. There are different teams, smaller, bigger, even on the second division of Argentinian football, where these problems happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It doesn't necessarily signify violence between teams. It can signify safety. But I guess more broadly, if you don't necessarily have the attendance numbers, then you wouldn't necessarily be able to look at the same kinds of effects that I think Rob was referring to when he was looking at arrests at football matches here in England, because the attendance data is quite well known here.
Yeah, for example, there was a moment where they tried to implement some kind of a fans ID recognition or something like that, so to avoid the fans with some criminal background to get into the stadium. But it was something that lasted for a couple of months, and then it vanished. Yeah, so yeah, that is true.
More questions and comments from others in the audience? I wondered to what extent, this is another Jorge earlier on mentioned, the endogeneity that you may have introduced by the way you presented this is, I wonder to what extent the top 5 teams are responsible for this policy continuing. To what extent are these policies agreed at a league level, so all the teams would vote for and against them, and therefore the top 5 might look at this and say after 5 years, look, it's helping us, guys, let's keep this policy in place of not allowing away fans into the stadiums?
Not necessarily the top 5 teams considered here are the 5 teams with the larger number of fans.
Right.
So, for example, teams that push to not change the measure are, for example, Boca and River. And I was reading today that also Vélez, Racing and Independiente are in doubt, but most of the teams from the interior of Argentina are pushing to get the visitors back, because it represents a lot for small clubs in the north of Argentina. Having River, that is one of the most important teams in Argentina, playing there with their fans, and that is very important for them, economically speaking. And even one of these frustrating intents of getting the visitors back for the national tournament, one of they have a price for the tickets for the local fans, and like 3 times the price for the visitor fans. So it seems everyone has something at stake in this issue. So yeah, it's difficult that we will see a change in a future. In a close future.
I mean, related to that actually is you might want to emphasize a little bit more in your presentation the away fan culture that I presume existed prior to the ban. Certainly, as mentioned, I think different countries have a different away fan culture. Traveling around isn't necessarily something that's done in some countries, and in other countries it is. And I guess the extent to which it was banned suggests that there was a vibrant away fan culture, and that's my understanding. But you might want to emphasize that a little bit more, the nature of the away fan culture.
Yeah, so it was. I was doubting about, like, okay, should I do too much emphasis on telling what happened or just getting to the scientific part? Yeah, but I ended up like mixing, like telling this was something. But that's true. That's something that we discuss about. Okay, should we do too much emphasis on why the ban is here or no? Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any more questions and comments from others in the audience? Well, we'll take that as a no. And so thank you once again, Federico. A really interesting talk. And we're going to return next week when we have Katrine Scharfenkamp from Bielefeld University, who's presenting the effect of role models' rise and fall on cultural diversity in female football teams. So thanks once again, everyone. Good to see everyone online, and look forward to seeing you again next week. And I wish you all a great weekend in the meantime.
Thank you.